Hey there, folks. You are listening to Screen Watching. I got the name. You are listening to Screen Watching. My name is Dan Barrett, joined by Simon Foster. Now, look, Screen Watching, we put a fair bit of time into the planning of this, which is why today it is the, 21st of May. There's a federal election taking place in Australia this very afternoon, this evening. Right now, people are at the poll booths. They are filling out forms. They're getting their sausages afterwards. It's a big day of democracy here in Australia. So obviously, when we reach our middle bit in the podcast, that is usually where we find some sort of topical conversation to have there. So obviously, we're going to do a section which is about movies which play around the themes of democracy and voting and electioneering and all that sort of excitement. There are so many great films and TV shows that explore this very idea. But no, we won't be doing that. Instead, we'll be talking about Japan or some nonsense. Anyway, folks, we've got a lot of stuff coming up in this week's show. Reviews, the Japan nonsense, and other conversational matter. This is Screen Watching. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher, mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
This is Screen Watching. My name is Dan Barrett. I already said that. Simon Foster, you're joining me as well. This week, we are talking about so many big things. The big things just keep on rolling. This week, I'm going to be talking about the hot new Netflix series, The Lincoln Lawyer. Or at least it was hot and new about 6 days ago. I'm not sure about now. I'm going to look at the new Amazon Prime Video series, Night Sky, and Tokyo Vice, which is a brand new HBO Max show. Well, Max show, which is debuting here in Australia on Paramount Plus. What have you got on your docket?
Good day. Good day. Oh, hello to you. Good day to you, and good day to all the listeners. Yes, we have a very busy day today. It is election day. Vote one, Screen Watching. We stand on the platform of uneducated opinion and old white man intolerance. That's where we're coming from. Today on Screen Watching, I'll be talking about the new Australian film, How to Please a Woman, the new British film, To Olivia, and the new Norwegian film, The Innocents. So there's quite a few things out in cinemas this week to have a chat about. You been well, mate? Everything good in the sunny north?
Oh, look, it's been a very big week. Like, there's this whole election business. I may have made an offer on a house that's been accepted. So now I have to do like throwing up paperwork and stuff. That's rough.
Great
I don't know how that works.
That's the first time I've heard that. That's very exciting. Well done to you.
Yeah. Oh, look, it could all fall apart on the next day or two. So let's see what happens. But right now, it looks like I might have a house and like a roof over said like me. I may have a place to sleep.
You're a provider. And that's really the man's role in the modern world, isn't it?
Oh, geez. What sort of podcast has this become? Before we get too far into it, let's distract everyone and just do some reviews.
It stinks.
No, ma'am. Sorry, that's a bit of Married with Children male support group action going on. Yeah. Speaking of Married with Children, did you hear that Married with Children's coming back?
I read your newsletter. I read your newsletter every single week. Yes, I have. You must be.
But it comes out daily.
Yeah, that's true. That's what I mean. I read it once a week. It's I'm excited. I was a fan of certainly the early years of Married with Children. It was fairly, base stuff, but it did it with a lot of chemistry and good vibes about it. So yeah, I mean, in the current climate, is it going to work? We'll have to wait and see how it adapts itself.
That's it. For those that don't know, Married with Children is believed to be coming back soon, but as an animated series, which I'm very much for.
That's very exciting. I know, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, wasn't this the review segment?
Yeah, I guess so. Let's do that. Simon, please. Do you want to kick us off with a brand new Australian feature film?
It's called.
Sorry, wait. Guys, it's an Australian feature film, but don't stop listening. It's going to be okay. We're going to talk about some other stuff soon.
How to Please a Woman. Play the clip.
Sorry, I forgot to cue out the clip. I was too busy being funny talking about Australian film.
Gina.
Yes?
You got me for 2 hours.
2 hours?
Then I'll do anything you want me to do.
Anything? Do you think you could clean my house?
Sorry, was misogyny up front to balance out what we're doing here?
That's exactly what we're doing. They've got to provide a balance in this electioneering void that we find ourselves. This supremely awkward first half of the film gives way to a slightly more enlightened story, eventually in writer-director Renee Webster's debut feature, How to Please a Woman. For much of the film, the answer to the question posed in the title is have a hot guy clean your home and then get you off, until Webster and her game cast zero in on some of the deeper needs of both the sexes. When How to Please a Woman stops trying to be a sexy comedy romp, it finds its sexy dramedy vibe just fine. Now, Brit import Sally Phillips plays 50-something accountant Gina Henderson, suddenly unemployed with a solid case for wrongful dismissal, I should say, and all but ignored by her chilly husband, Adrian, Cameron Daddo. A birthday gift in the form of sexy ginger dancer Tom, Alexander England, is not her thing until he cleans her home and inspires in her to form a company of sexy cleaners dancers. Of course, Gina is the last to realise she's playing pimp for her swim buddies, all of whom are double dipping on her team of bow-hunk skillful cleaning skills. See the bunny ears there on cleaning skills. Renee Webster's first 40 minutes dabble somewhat uncomfortably in moments of sex worker shaming and non-sex lifestyle outing and a general air of middle-class moral superiority, all of which is turned on its head in the second half when all forms of satisfaction, sexual or otherwise, are respected. While at the heart of Webster's story is the theme of female empowerment, the lesson learned is that good sex, personal connection, and mutual tenderness are all based on communication and understanding, which is kind of a nice message. The Western Australian coastline provides a lovely backdrop to the rom-com fantasy elements and a bright palette. Local easy on the eye talent like Eric Thompson as Gina's age-appropriate co-worker, people like Tasma Walton, Carolyn Brazier and Nina Young all deliver performances that balance the right amounts of comedy and drama. The usually really exuberant Phillips, anyone who's seen her in any of her Taskmaster appearances or Would I Lie to You sort of panel work, she's very constrained for much of the film as Gina, but that only gives her ultimate blossoming, which isn't a spoiler really, a bit more added gravitas. So in the end, this film won me over after a kind of rocky start to it.
Is there any reason in the film that we need to have a British star come over to be in this Australian movie beyond the need to make it saleable back to the UK?
Yeah, look, no, I would say not, which doesn't detract from how good Sally Phillips is in the role. So I wouldn't say her casting is to the detriment of the actual creativity and the actual story and the good feel vibe of the movie. But could an Australian actress have pulled off this part? Yeah, probably. I don't doubt that could have happened. But yeah, you make a very valid point.
Look at you dropping phrases like pulled off while talking about a sex comedy.
Yeah, I saw the joke in there, but I wasn't going to go there because I couldn't rely on you to do that.
Yeah, no, well, we're mature. We wouldn't. Speaking of mature, let's take a look at the new Amazon Prime series dealing with a very mature couple. It's called Night Sky.
I have something to tell you. And you're very lucky because I've never told anyone this in my whole life.
You ready to make history?
You say that every time.
So whenever you do the unthinkable and leave your house to take a walk around the neighborhood, you'll likely see that couple. They're usually retired. They're usually always there sitting on their patio or balcony, just watching the world go by. As Night Sky begins, we see one such couple, Irene and Franklin York, played by Sissy Spacek and J.K. Simmons. But the perch they watch the world go by from is a little bit different. They're not watching the world go by. They're watching other worlds go by. Their secret is that through their shed on their acreage property, they're able to enter a small viewing room where they're transported somewhere, destination unknown, where they're deep in space watching the eye-popping night sky above what appears to be a desert planet.
Wow.
This has been a regular ritual of theirs for decades now, but the cracks are beginning to form in their lives. Franklin's getting tired of it. Is it that he wants to do more with his final years, or is this frustration connected to his diminishing mental acuity? Meanwhile, Irene is happy to continue watching this marvel as she grapples with her own mortality after getting some bad news from her doctor. Now, what is enjoyable about Night Sky is also what's really frustrating about it. The show is very leisurely paced, and it keeps a rhythm that's very much in line with the general quiet demeanor of our protagonists. But at the same time, it never feels like there's a lot going on. Certainly not enough to keep you engaged across all 8 episodes. there's maybe just a bit too much lethargy going on in the show, too much time wasting filler. And at no time did I really feel especially rewarded for that time that I was putting into it. At the end of the first episode, the show delivers a fairly intriguing mystery that adds an extra challenge on top of the lives of the York couple. And then the second episode doubles down on that doubles down on the mystery at least, with the introduction of 2 more characters half a world away. And those mystery elements are suddenly delicious enough to keep you interested enough to stay with it. And it's frustrating to note that so often one watches US TV shows and you just wish that the shows would slow down just that little bit and take a breath. This is exactly the show that one would hope for, a series that takes its time and delivers relatable, human characters who are dealing with some very heavy real-world concerns while also thrown into the world of the fantastic. I just wish it wasn't so dull. Night Sky, it's now streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
Yeah, it's a terrific trailer for it. Once again, one that I've not had a chance to look at in depth, but my sci-fi leanings have got me interested in. But yes, the casting, the lead casting of Sissy Spacek and J.K. Simmons suggests that it certainly skews older, which is something you don't often see in sci-fi works. You know, Cocoon and Cocoon 2 being one of the obvious exceptions. So yeah, maybe I'll have a look at this one because the visuals certainly look good, but Dan's review has me a little worried.
It's like, I use the word dull, and like it is, like I'm not wrong in calling it dull, but it's also unfair to call it dull. It's just the kind of show where, look, get yourself in the wrong mood and there's a very strong chance you'll be reaching for that phone, and the show makes it very easy to get distracted away from what's going on because there just isn't really a lot of meat on the bone to it.
Okay. Does it come from, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but does it come from a source material? It sounds like something that would have been novel-based or even graphic novel-based.
Look, I don't believe it comes from a graphic novel, and I don't believe that there's a novel that this is based on either. As far as I'm aware, it's an original work, and I can't think of the name of the 2 guys listed as the creators, but one of them is actually the son of Dennis Miller, if you remember the comedian from Saturday Night Live. And yeah, he's got to be a right-wing Republican these days, but, you know, try to look the other way.
All right. So it's called, what is it called? I forgot what it's called.
It's called Night Sky, and it's streaming now on Amazon Prime.
All right. In limited release around town at the moment is a lovely little British film called To Olivia.
My name is Roald Dahl. Some of you may know my books.
Well done for Johnny and the Giant. Pineapple. Oh, thank you.
And this is my wife, Patricia Neal, star of stage and screen.
You're one big kid, and the day you stop is the day I file for divorce.
In this heartfelt but fairly by the numbers weepy, Downton Abbey's Hugh Bonneville plays author Roald Dahl opposite Kelley Hawes in the role of Hollywood actress Patricia Neal. The pair in real life seemed an unlikely couple, but were deeply in love and built a young family at the height of their respective careers. He writing children's classics like James and the Giant Peach, and she starring in The Day the Earth Stood Still and opposite Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's. In 1961, while living in the picturesque UK countryside in the days prior to compulsory measles inoculation, their 7-year-old daughter, Olivia, played by Darcy Hewitt, succumbs to encephalitis, sending both parents into an emotional and professional tailspin and putting unfathomable strain on their once idyllic partnership. Lost in their grief is youngest daughter Tessa, played by Isabella Johnson, who must deal with her parents' ambivalence towards life as well as losing her sister. Now, Bonneville is great. He captures the immense void of a father's pain upon losing a child and the blank stares that accompany an artist losing their muse. With The Giant Peach a commercial failure, his new project about a boy named Charlie and his adventures in a cavernous, candy-filled wonderland needs to be a big hit, but only booze and self-pity motivates him to keep living. Guilty of the occasional bum note in her broad portrayal of Neil, Kelley Hawes finds surer footing as the actress when she heads back to LA to secure the lead in the career-reviving hit HUD opposite Paul Newman, who's played by a great Sam Heughan, who looks so much like Newman, for director Martin Ritt, played by Conleth Hill. Graham Frake's stunning photography of English estate life aside, To Olivia feels very much like a top-tier TV production instead of a theatrical feature. The ambition-free direction of John Hay is overcompensated for by Debbie Wiseman's music, which exclamation marks every emotional beat in the film. One stunning asset is the opening credit sequence, which tracks the early stages of Dahl's and Neil's careers through some really stylish animation. Think like that, like what they did with Catch Me If You Can, and it's the same sort of stuff. Defenders of this very British examination of stunted creativity and corrosive sadness will use the term understated, as only the UK sector can deliver. A very no-frills account of a true story told with a straightforward, nuance-free style. There's probably a punchier, more cinematic narrative to be told, one that further develops the conflict between the egocentric artist and the selfless parent in the one person, and I hope that gets made one day. To Olivia will do just fine until then, but it probably could have been a little bit more. So it's in limited release in cinemas as we speak.
I really like movies like this that shine a light on someone that you think that you know really well, that just reveal like a true inner self to them that you just never really heard of before. So with that in mind, I'm assuming that the film goes to great lengths to talk about his anti-Semitism and some of the racist and sexist viewpoints held by Roald.
Yeah, it doesn't. Unfortunately,
it avoids all of that. Jeez.
Yes, it really does.
What's that, Simon?
It takes place for a very short and specific time in these two people's lives, and
so he just doesn't see Jewish people during that time to diminish.
Clearly, yeah, no, that's very true. You put an interesting spin on this, shall we say, blinkered view of Mr. Dahl and his socio-political leanings, let's say.
Yeah, I found it interesting when Netflix struck a deal with the Roald Dahl company, I think it's called, whatever the company is set up to manage his intellectual property at this point, and the family own the the organization. But they did put out a press release which is very much saying that Roald Dahl was of its time and yada yada yada, please watch our stuff, make us some money.
Yes, if you can put all that behind you, there's probably a nice sort of Saturday afternoon watch in To Olivia, and bring your hankies too, because it's got that element to it. But yes, if you're aware of Mr. Dahl's points of view on certain topics, this may be a slightly more fanciful film than you would have hoping for.
Can you please tell me there's moments, and this is what I actually really like in these things, where they have to try to work in like a revelation about the work, like a creative sort of moment, and just sort of work it into like their day-to-day life. So they can go, wait a sec, I can incorporate that in my book. Like, is there a moment where Roald Dahl like looks at one of his young daughters and says, come here, you little Oompa Loompa?
Well, I know you're joking, but actually the film is full of those moments. Roald Dahl
I
only...
wasn't joking. I was sure the film would be full of those moments.
It's all he does is use his family life, and which is why the death of his young daughter was such a turning point for him, because she was such a key source of all his material. Like I say, she was his muse. So yeah, this sent him into a creative tailspin that he took years to recover from.
I need to go vomit.
Thing I know, success is all about momentum. In court, before you can win, you got to believe you can win.
But what if you don't?
Then you better fake it till you make it.
Look, no scripted TV writer has ever been as influential with courtroom drama shows than David E. Kelley. He presided over LA Law in the 80s and 90s. He was showrunning that Stephen Bochco drama for 2 seasons at the peak of that series. When he struck out on his own with Middle America family drama Picket Fences, he incorporated a heavy courtroom drama element to that show. He has a writing credit on almost every episode of the first 3 seasons of that series. And that's old school. This is like 22 episodes a year. Just bonkers. He's got a writing credit on pretty much all of that. Just a few years later, he launched the serious legal drama The Practice, wrote the bulk of that show for its first 5 seasons. Concurrently, he was also writing the quirky legal comedy Ally McBeal. And when The Practice wound down, he then went on to do spin-off series Boston Legal. And admittedly, with that show, Kelley was writing less. He wrote a mere quarter to half of the episodes in any given season. Man, what a slacker. Anyway, since then, he's also done courtroom shows like Harry's Law, the first season of Goliath, and recently the HBO drama The Undoing. This, of course... What am I write these things and I never really read them back until I start trying to read them out loud. Why can't I even Yeah. Shocking. Okay. These, of course, are just the courtroom shows that Kelley's written. He has hundreds of hours of other TV shows that he's either written or executive produced. Now, all of this is to say that when you're approaching the new Netflix drama, The Lincoln Lawyer, you need to understand 2 things going into it. you're not just watching a show written by one of the most prolific TV writers in the history of the medium. He's also one of the best writers in the history of the medium. But the other thing that you really need to understand is he has written a lot of TV courtroom material. After writing that much, you have to wonder if he has anything new to say. Can he approach a legal courtroom story with a new perspective or take? Can he tell an original courtroom story still? And the answer to that, based on what I've seen of The Lincoln Lawyer so far, is no.
Oh.
The first episode of The Lincoln Lawyer is the only one that's penned by David E. Kelley in the series. And what you get there is something that feels very much like a 90s broadcast TV premise pilot. It was originally greenlit as a CBS drama, but COVID production issues led to the network not going forward with it. Netflix then picked it up, and I don't know how much it was retooled for streaming, but it feels very, very network TV. The series overall is showrun by Ted Humphrey. He was one of the writer-producers on The Good Wife and worked on 135 hours or so of that courtroom TV drama. He's also no stranger to the genre himself. And so The Lincoln Lawyer as a show looks and feels very familiar looking, perhaps even more so if you saw the Matthew McConaughey film from a few years ago or read the Michael Connelly books that the series is based on. Its premise has it that the titular Lincoln Lawyer is a lawyer who got into a car accident and hooked on opioids as a result. While he worked through his addiction, his career faltered. But as luck would have it at the start of the show, a lawyer friend has died and left him his practice and client list. So now he's catching up on current cases, but he's got a problem. He doesn't have enough time to review all the case notes, so he hires a young woman to drive his Lincoln town car around town while he tries to get on top of everything. He is the Lincoln Lawyer. Yeah. Manuel Garcia Ruffalo stars as the lawyer Mickey Haller, and playing Mickey's two ex-wives are Nev Campbell and Becky Newton. And Aussie Angus Sampson, the enforcer himself, is in the show as an investigator who has a personal connection to Mickey. Everyone's fine in this, and look, everyone is fine in this, even if you're mostly left wondering why Nev Campbell's career has stalled the way that it did, and she's now appearing in this kind of a thing. There's another question you may have. Why didn't Amazon jump on this show as a companion to Bosch? Both are based on series of books by Michael Connelly, and the characters are half-brothers. It feels orphaned on Netflix, and it's just weird looking. So look, you may have noticed I spent my review talking around the show rather than discussing the show itself. There's a reason for that. Mostly it's just that the show is a bit generic and pretty disposable. Some of those listening right now will have already watched this when it debuted on Netflix last weekend and have possibly binge-watched the full season by this point. I wouldn't be entirely surprised. It is very, very watchable. It just isn't terribly compelling. Take a ride with The Lincoln Lawyer now on Netflix.
I was very worried. We were, I don't know, maybe a quarter into the podcast and you hadn't mentioned Bosch yet. So this provided that avenue for you. So good on you for that. Yeah, I vaguely remember the McConaughey film. I know I even saw it in cinemas, but most of it's gone from my head. It was all right. But in every other regard, I don't think I have much pull for and I mean, obviously the other great David E. Kelley moment is that is he still married to Michelle Pfeiffer? Is that still a thing?
Oh, absolutely. Like, really, David E. Kelley is a dude that was winning at life.
Yeah, he really was.
He still is. Like, he's got like 12 different TV shows in various states of production.
Yeah. Look, yeah, maybe this just isn't my bag at the moment. So The Lincoln Lawyer is where? On Amazon Prime?
No, it's on Netflix. If it was on Amazon Prime, Bosch and him would still be brothers, but they're not.
Okay, I got it. All right, let's go from...
You know what's weird? Sorry, just getting back to it.
Right.
So, and this is the thing I didn't write in my review, and I was thinking about this while I was reading it out loud then, which is why I sort of threw myself out for a moment. Essentially, what you've got is David E. Kelley, who I actually think was fairly creative in creating all of those scripts around picket fences and LA Law and The Practice and Ally McBeal and the many other legal shows he did. I kind of feel he always found an interesting way into story. But here, they're just really generic court cases. There's nothing really happening. And then you couple that with the fact that Ted Humphrey is the dude that's actually show running it. And Ted Humphrey, as a person on The Good Wife was a show that found a very broad variety of different cases and was maybe even more experimental than David E. Kelley was in terms of finding his way into this very classic courtroom drama. But instead, what you find here are court cases that could just as easily have been lifted out of Perry Mason films and TV shows from, decades gone by.
How much time do you think? I have a bit of trouble envisioning David E. Kelley sitting in front of his laptop banging out scripts anymore. I think, how much do you think he's giving over to interns or giving over to, well, maybe not interns or work experience people, but he's his team of writers who are no doubt alongside him.
Okay, so look, this is one of those things. So on all of his TV shows, I'm sure that he had a writer's room of some discussion. So they were probably there helping breaking stories.
Yeah.
But as you would be well aware, the rules around being a member of the Writers Guild for both film and TV means that the person who gets the credit on the production has to have created so much of the writing.
Yep.
I think on TV it's a little bit looser, but I've never really heard stories of writers complaining that David E. Kelley didn't give them enough credit.
Okay.
So my understanding is that he writes the majority of it, even though he may get sort of story ideas from elsewhere, possibly. But also you do find occasional scripts will be co-written by him, and there's various other elements. So I get the feeling with him, it's actually fairly legitimate. I think that there are some people that can just pump out the script after script. And at his heyday, like he was writing the majority of Ally McBeal and The Practice at the same time. Both of these shows were 22 episodes, maybe 24 episodes a year.
And creative and
Creative
legitimately
and,
groundbreaking in many regards. So you're absolutely
vibrant
right.
and interesting, and broke a lot of conventions along the way. Like, he's a genuine TV talent, and I think he's just, one of those special people. My understanding as well is that, and you mentioned the whole Michelle Pfeiffer of it all, he's very much a family-orientated guy, and all that script writing, it wasn't like he's one of these writers who's there writing well into the night. He'd come in at 9 o'clock, write, leave at 5 o'clock, and start again the next day.
Good guy.
Yeah, just incredible.
Yeah, I'd probably rush home if Michelle Pfeiffer was there too. But
oh yeah, how was your wife?
No, she's very well. Hopefully. Let's go all the way to Norway. For The Innocents.
You know how you love these clips where I struggle to find some sort of foreign language clip that makes sense?
Yeah.
Give this one a go.
Her gikk ni dere gjør. Kan dere gå ut og så lenge? Det er Hva det griset her?
That is the most dialogue I could find in that trailer.
Well, I've got 4 different cast members' names I'm going to try and do in this one. So if you see me sort of leaning sideways, you'll know I've done something to myself.
Sit back, everyone. This is going to be good.
4 uniquely gifted preteens find themselves in a complex power struggle in Eskil Voigt's The Innocents, a contemporary Norwegian supernatural thriller that may not be the best film for new parents like yourself, Dan. In a nice apartment block complex in Oslo's outer suburbs, new arrival Ida, Raquel Leonora Flirtum, reveals herself to be quite the potential sociopath despite her preteen age. When her parents aren't looking, she pinches the bare skin of her autistic non-verbal older sister Anna, played by Alva Brinsmore Ramstad, and exploring the new terrain with fellow mini-sadist Ben, Sam Ashraf, they stumble upon a lost cat, an encounter that doesn't end well for the cat. The 4th new friend is a sweet kid, Aisha, Mina Yasmin Bremsmith Ashheim, whose psychic capabilities give her insight into Anna's cohesive inner thoughts and provide the bridge that draws the mind powers out amongst the 4 new friends. This includes some basic speech out of Anna and a murderous psychosis out in Ben. As a parent, you and I, we all assume kids get up to some twisted shit when left alone, especially ones that are developing an unhealthy emotional disconnect from key role models in their lives. But Voigt's protagonists are some of the worst killer kitties since Village of the Damned. There's some nightmarish stuff in here, not least the cat moment and what Ben decides is best for his abusive mum. There's also some extraneous stuff. It blows out to 2 hours, which is my only real complaint about the film. Some really sort of crisp editing could have upped the urgency of the story and given the quite downbeat final moments a real Scandi chill, but there's some really intense moments in this film between the 4 kids, especially at the midway point where they really sort of take advantage of each other's psychic abilities. At one point, and I couldn't shake this notion in my head, I had the thought that this would have been a great X-Files episode with Mulder and Scully dropped into this high-rise environment, discovering the occasional body killed under odd circumstances and surrounded by glaring kids with nasty secrets. And unfortunately, I couldn't get out of my head. I really wanted to see the X-Files version of that. But if you like a good, scary, beautifully shot film, and very well-written one, Eskil Voigt is a co-writer with Joachim Trier on The Worst Person in the World, the film that was a big deal a few months back. This is certainly a film for you. Check it out in limited release. It's called The Innocents.
Okay. I may do that.
Yeah.
I probably won't. It's
I know.
a lot of effort.
A lot of effort. All right. Well, let's go from Norway to Tokyo for
If we
Tokyo
can.
Vice, if we can. Let's see.
You wish to be a crime reporter in Japan. Why?
You think because you're a foreigner, the roads are different?
You like busting my balls, huh?
It is a great joy of my life.
It's interesting the contrast between the clip that I pulled there and also Innocence, because both are reflective of their trailers. The trailer for Tokyo Vice has a lot of English language in it, which is not the case for the show at all.
Oh, really? Okay.
The show is
That's
very
it.
Japanese.
Well, okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That'll be good for our middle.
Anyway, on with the review. Ansel Elgort is apparently the real name of a real highly punchable actor who stars in the new Michael Mann TV series Tokyo Vice. We open the show in media res with him visiting some quote unquote, respectable Japanese businessmen alongside an organized crime detective played by Ken Watanabe. Shit gets real tense when they meet the guys, but then we cut to 2 years prior. Elgort's character, Jake Adelstein, is living in Tokyo above a ramen joint. He is working teaching English to Japanese students, but out of hours, he's soaking up the culture and studying an aptitude test to work for a newspaper. As the white guy in the room, there's a lot of questions about his ability to write well in Japanese. It turns out that he's actually pretty good, and he gets hired as a cadet. He's an ambitious fellow and very quickly tries to make nice with the local cops. As you'd assume, things start to get very complicated for him very quickly. The show was filmed in Tokyo, which gives the series incredible visual authenticity. I really love it when I'm in Japan personally, and so I always get a thrill out of seeing locations shooting there. So I ate this show up entirely. And the show also feels distant, foreign, and frightening. It's as though Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation had a love child with Michael Mann's Collateral or his Miami Vice feature film. And the show does have one real key problem, which is Elgort in the lead. Jake Adelstein is a real-life reporter, and the show's based on his reporting of his time in Japan. There are questions about the legitimacy of his story, but I say that's mostly irrelevant to the quality of the experience of watching the show. Now, I don't know what Adelstein's like IRL, so perhaps Elgort's performance is completely spot on. Sorry, Elgort? What a name. Elgort's performance is spot on, but boy, is he a dull character. And look, that can be beneficial when we're seeking an audience surrogate character, but the lead character, no. It's pretty much like there's a huge void at the center of the screen for almost the entire running time of the show. If you're a viewer who's easily sold on a show which leans on Japanese location filming and or loves gritty crime dramas, especially with a Yakuza twist, boy, is this the show for you. Anyone else, can I please recommend Night Sky?
Okay. There's been a decreasing level of interest in me about Ansel Elgort over the years. I was fine with him in Baby Driver. He kind of suited that part, and the film was a blast.
Yeah, I thought he was fine there.
I thought he was kind of a charisma vacuum in West Side Story. I thought he was the one weak link in that, despite having some moments. And you know, you put that down to Spielberg and his co-stars. And
I thought
I
the
must
weakest link in that film was actually getting audiences turn up for it.
wow. But also. And he's probably been the one stumbling block for me to sort of binging all the way through Tokyo Vice. I've yet to see an episode, despite being a huge Watanabe fan, despite being a huge Michael Mann fan. It's going to be Elgort that I'm going to have to overcome to check this out. Plus, he's had some off-screen dalliances that don't reflect well on him. So, yeah, look, I'm keen to check this out. Does it sort of carry all the visual flair and tics that Michael Mann is known for?
This show is, and please excuse my language here, it's so fucking gorgeous. I love the look and feel of the show so much. There is so much I love about this show, but Elgort at the center of it just, I don't know, like
sucks the fun out
of it. Fine, I guess, but man, it'd be so much better if it was cast differently.
Okay, well, that's interesting. And it didn't, as we mentioned earlier, it did inspire in me the middle bit today, which is looking at some how American productions view the Japanese landscape in their films and TV, and in some very funny commercials as well, which we'll be having a look at. So that's coming up later on. Well, that's a very hectic review section. I should just mention very quickly that also in cinemas this week is a Japanese film, Pompo the Cinephile. This is an anime film about a young producer who hands over the reins of her first very serious film to her young assistant, but things tend to go off the rails a little bit when Hollywood does that, or certainly when the Japanese film sector does that. Beautiful looking film, and it's all about the world of filmmaking in that country. So it's called Pompo the Cinephile. And hey, there's another Gerard Butler action film doing the rounds. It's called Last Seen Alive, with a premise that sounds an awful lot like the Kiefer Sutherland film The Vanishing. Gerard's wife goes missing at a gas stop station. All the cops think he's in on it, which he isn't. So he sets about solving the crime himself, which takes him right into the criminal underbelly of this small town. Sounds very Butler-esque. It's called Last Seen Alive. It's in wide release this week and on DVD next week, probably.
I got sent a promotional email from Hoyts during the week telling me to come and see the latest release movies. And that was the feature film for this week as far as Hoyts were concerned. And I looked at it, and one, I'd never heard of the film before. And two, I kind of thought it was a made-up movie.
You think they've got a department there that just makes up posters to send out on their EDMs?
Yes, but also like not a very creative team.
Gerard Butler he's just churning out these very by the numbers. I mean, this would have reduced him to a straight to video person 20 years ago. These movies would have just churned out and turned up on video on your video store shelves, but now they're finding their ways into cinemas somehow.
Well, there's just so little product that's being released to the cinema screen that these films suddenly have this chance to get big screen releases and improve their validity as far as public perception is concerned.
You have got a fascinating list here of what else in our What Else Have You Been Watching section. Do you want to get started? Go for it.
Oh, look, this is just a whole bunch of shows that I was possibly considering reviewing. And, there's only so many slots each week.
Sure.
But these are things that I've seen. So I saw the season return of Hacks. If you like the first season of the show, it's very much more of the same. I have to say, though, what has it been, a year since we previously saw the show? And it could just be that I've had a pretty busy year, but I came back into this and I was just like, I kind of feel I've seen everything I need to with the show.
Mm. Yeah, I've heard some reports that it's not quite the second season we'd had a hope for. I've certainly heard that about the second season of Bridgerton too, which we haven't touched on, but by all accounts, that's a far lesser endeavor than the first season was. So maybe these are one season wonders.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for the limited series, but also at the same time, we look at limited series and say, well, why weren't they just movies? But anyway, that's another conversation for another time. Something else I saw was the first episode of Super Pumped, which was the real life Travis Kalanick story, the guy that founded Uber and all the tech bro mentality that saw him essentially go from strength to strength.
JGL, wasn't it? What's his name? Joseph
Gordon-Levitt's the lead in it. Quentin Tarantino does the narration on it.
Wow. Okay.
And look, this is the sort of show which I think if it came out a couple of years ago, I think we would have gone a little bit nuts for. But this has come at the same time that we've seen about 3 or 4 other shows about sort of faux biography series of well-known sort of tech bros and other people in highly visible industries like that. And I don't know, it's just more of the same. And I don't know, it doesn't really quite sing on screen. It's not quite as zany as you would really hope that it might be. Also, another series which has really the same problem, Angeline, which is a series starring that lady that was in Shameless,
Emmy Rossum.
She stars as the titular Angeline. And if you don't know who Angeline is, she was essentially a woman who featured on a number of LA billboards. So there were all these billboards across LA just advertising this woman. She wasn't a musician. She wasn't an actor. People didn't really quite understand what she was promoting other than herself. Mm-hmm. And that was absolutely what she was promoting. But this is the real life story of her and exactly what her deal was. It's a limited series, just 5 episodes. And it's a show which, it's very watchable, but at the same time, it's not really doing that much. And I couldn't help but think about Pam and Tommy while watching this.
It's got a real Pam and Tommy vibe to it. I think it's Martin Freeman's in there as well, isn't he? Which is kind of a pull. I like what he does.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, who's the main British guy? There's a young guy.
Gosh, I was really hoping you weren't going to sort of.
No, that's okay. I thought it.
Who's in there? I know Hamish Linklater's in there.
Okay.
Who else is in there?
But yeah, Angeline was sort of she was very mocked in her time, but she really was sort of the forebearer for the the Kardashian type famous for just being famous type of celebrity. She set the standard of self-promotion back in the day.
Yeah, Alex Kapowski, who people know from Girls,
Mhm.
he's in there, and also Lucas Gage, who is the main guy that's opposite, or at least in the first episode.
Well, speaking Martin Freeman, and I'm going off topic here, but have you seen any of The Responder, which everyone's sort of
No.
buzzing about? We might have a look at that in the weeks ahead, because that seems to be the hot topic at the moment.
Where is it here in Australia? Is it SBS On Demand that's got that one?
Yes, I think so. Yes, I think it is.
Maybe. It cropped up somewhere that I didn't really quite expect.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, Angeline, basically, it's got the same problem as Super Pump does, which is that the show should be a little bit funnier. It should be a little bit more hyper. It should be a little bit more surreal and just a bit zany and wacky and interesting. If you think about Pam and Tommy, I think it's in episode 2 or 3 of that Tommy Lee's penis starts talking to him.
Mhm.
And like, it's those sort of odd moments that you kind of want from something like Angeline, which is characters that are so big and bold and audacious, but it's just not there. It's too muted for what's a ridiculous subject matter.
Okay.
But like, it's okay. It's very watchable. There'll be some people who are like, what are you talking about? It was fine. But it never becomes more than just being fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And the other thing is on Apple TV Plus, there's a series called Now and Then. It's got Rosie Perez and a couple of other familiar-ish faces. And basically, it's a story about a night that goes terribly wrong 20 years ago. And then it jumps forward to how people are dealing with the consequences of their actions now as adults.
Of the same sort of quality that we've come to expect from Apple TV?
No.
Ooh, that's not
look,
good.
again, this has got the same problem that I've keep on flagging with shows like Lincoln Lawyer, which is that it just kind of feels like it's a network drama from like 20 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. I get it.
And like, it's fine. Like, it looks
Unfortunately,
good and it's very watchable. People will sit back and be able to binge watch a good bulk of this without being too bothered, but it's pretty forgettable and it's just not quite really worth your time.
Well, I am going to freak everybody out because for the first time this week, I was able to tick off one of my shameful titles, one of the movies that I've never, ever seen, which everyone tells me I really should see. And it is the David Lynch debut film Eraserhead from 1977.
What?
Yes, I know. I'd never seen it. And it was kind of a big deal when I was growing up. It turned up at every sort of cult film screening session that was around me at my favorite sort of dark flea pit cinemas at Glebe and North Sydney when I was growing up. So I'd never seen Eraserhead. I found myself with a spare half hour and in the early stages of doing the on-screen title crawl to find something to watch. I stumbled on Eraserhead and I thought, yes, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to do it now. It is a pure nightmarish vision, surprisingly funnier than I thought. There is some moments in there that I thought were really quite clever sort of spins and very funny spins on parenthood, but it's all done with this really deep black and white cinematography. And the little creature at the middle of it, who is essentially the baby of our hero played by Jack Nance, is just this horrific little creation. So it's got quite a nightmarish feel to it. But I can certainly see why it's held everyone in thrall since it came out all those years ago. It's a particularly unique vision, not necessarily of its time. Like, it could be a timeless kind of work looking back on it after 40 odd years. It's a remarkable work and certainly was a very early indication what he was going to do with Twin Peaks. As I mentioned, Jack Nance is in there. He's the one who actually says she's dead, wrapped in plastic. You've also got Charlotte Stewart in there as his wife, who played Betty Briggs in Twin Peaks. It took him 3 years to shoot this. He ran out of money, and it was actually Sissy Spacek who threw a lot of her carry dollars into the film. And Jack Fisk, Sissy Spacek's husband, did a lot of work on the film. So I kind of went into an Eraserhead rabbit hole after watching it, and it's got one of the coolest IMDb trivia pages you'll see, so check it out. Eraserhead, it's on most streaming platforms. I think it's almost in public domain now, so it's turned up, and there's a few different quality prints of it out there on your streaming channels. So check it out if you're in the mood for something a little bit freaky.
I'm shocked that you've never seen that David Lynch film before.
I get a lot of that. You remember a couple of years ago on Facebook when post 10 posters that of films you're shameful that you've never seen? The two big kickbacks I got were Eraserhead and Conan the Barbarian, both of which I've corrected now. I've seen both. Conan is just a terrible film, but Eraserhead is a pretty amazing piece of work.
Yeah, look, I won't defend the Conan film. It's pretty awful. But can I tell you my favorite David Lynch movie? And I want you to ask me why afterwards. Sure. My favorite film of his is Mulholland Drive.
Okay. First of all, one question. Why?
Because it's the only one of his films I've seen.
And you're ragging on me about not seeing a 40-year-old one. I've seen all of his films except this one. So why aren't you going to see his films?
I've just never seen his films. I've seen his TV shows, but I've just never.
You must have stumbled across Blue Velvet at some point.
I've never seen it. Oh. I mean, I've seen clips from it, obviously, but I've just never seen a film.
Wow, you have got a big weekend ahead of you, my friend.
Well, first I've got to get to the Chip and Dale movie, but then I'll get onto the David Lynch films. I get onto the really weird things like Blue Velvet and Eraserhead and
No. Of all his films, Blue Velvet is one of the most sort of linear and probably the least weird one when you look at it in hindsight.
But I was just getting to the joke where I was talking about Simple Stories being one of the weird films.
Oh, okay. I do apologize. It's when you get into I had a lot of trouble watching Inland Empire. I thought that was just weird for weird's sake. I didn't quite get what he was doing there. And even Mulholland Drive was one that kind of rattled my cage a little bit. I had to go back a couple of times to watch it. But God, you look at what he did with The Elephant Man and then Blue Velvet. And I've even come around on Dune. I think Dune's a pretty remarkable work as well. You've never seen the original Dune?
I tried watching it a couple of months ago and didn't get very far, but I have seen the remake, Denis Villeneuve's Dune, quite a number of times. Almost as many times as I've seen the Batman at this point.
I was going to say, you've given a lot of money over to Warner's this year, haven't you?
Hey, Simon, I think it's probably time for the two of us to sit back a little bit and think of lands of afar. We're going to spend a middle bit in just a moment going to Japan. So we're not talking about the election. Not today.
No.
Today is the day nor the place for it.
And I really think I got the little jab at the top of the podcast when we really should have talked more about the what the middle bit was today on the day of a federal election. And all I've been thinking about since you said that was the films that we could have looked at that dealt with politics and the machinations of democracy. Maybe we'll do that next week. Who knows?
In fairness, I didn't really think about that until I was scratching around to try to work out what I'd open the podcast with.
But I thought, as both you and I have been to Japan, and both you and I enjoy movies and TV shows, I thought we could look at how Japan and Japanese culture is viewed through the eyes of American filmmakers and some of the great films that have been shot there, or not so great films as that may be, and put a bit of a spin on it. Plus, I thought we could finish off with looking at what some of the big Hollywood stars do for cash in the Japanese, why do I keep doing that? Japanese advertising industry. Boy, there's some wild ones in there. But are you cool with all that?
Yeah, so when you presented this idea to me via text message in the early hours of the morning, essentially the way you sort of presented it was the idea of American characters visiting Japan. And that's fine. I was trying to think about it because, you obviously do films on this podcast. I do TV.
Yeah.
So I was trying to find TV ways into this.
And there's not a lot, because I did a little bit of research. There was a lot of films and there's very little TV or very little ways of finding them anyway.
Yeah. So essentially one of the differences between film and TV is that TV is episodic and continues on and there's budgets involved and you can't just spend an episode where the characters go to Japan. That just doesn't really happen. And so outside of a couple of cartoons where the characters might go to Japan, but even cartoons don't generally stray too much from their general location, because the way animation works is that you think that it's limitless, but it's really not. Essentially, they animate a certain number of backgrounds and then have the characters operate within those backgrounds.
Sure.
It's even computer CGI, everything. It's not just cell animation where you're animating cells in front of established backgrounds, but it's just it costs money to go that extra step. So it doesn't happen in TV. So I was trying to think of TV, and the only TV show I could legitimately come up with was there's an episode of Girls where you've got the Shoshana character who has gone to Japan to work over there.
Yes.
And that episode is huge fun. It's filmed in Japan. It's I'm pretty sure it was around Tokyo, as I recall. Like that film ticks all the boxes, but you really needed a offbeat HBO successful series to go off and have the budget to do this.
Yes, well, I think I did see that one in my research, a season 5 storyline, and Shoshana was in Japan for, I think it was a few episodes. She was in there. So
that said, I'm just talking about narrative things, but in the world of reality TV, there's a lot more doors open there. So in your list of things that you sent to me at like 2 a.m. in the morning, 3, I don't know, when did it turn up? You might mention The Amazing Race. So obviously they've gone to Japan a couple of times in that show and, do all sorts of zany pit stops and, stuff going on there. And that's always a treat. But I was also thinking there's always those documentaries, and they tend to come more from the UK than anywhere else, where you get some Westerner who goes to visit Japan and they experience the zany customs. And it's always that fish out of water thing. And I'll eat those things up, but they're never particularly that good. And they do border on being slightly offensive. And
yes, which was something we had to sort of skirt around, well, not skirt around, but be careful in how we presented this segment, because, and some of the films that I'll get to in a minute certainly are guilty of playing that caricature stereotype kind of Oriental, quote unquote, Oriental gentleman.
Well, you've got that, but you've also got the other thing that is more a conversation that happens on social media than it does in the real world. But just that idea of the white savior going to Japan to tell their story. And I was going to refer to that in a Tokyo Vice review that I did, but I dropped away from that. But I think what I wanted to say was that if you're telling an American story, I don't think it's really necessarily a concern that you've got a white savior who's going to save the day as they enter this sort of strange land. Because if you wanted to watch a movie about a Japanese person in Japan doing Japanese things, then you would watch a Japanese movie.
Yes.
But if you want to watch if you're watching an American movie, then you're obviously watching it from an American perspective of someone who's going over there to experience the culture and engage in the land, because they are the lead character ostensibly. Like, they usually are the person who creates change and like provides some sort of heroic element to things. And if you flip that, like, I don't really have a concern with a Japanese character going to, say, for example, the UK in that show that's dropped out of my mind right now. It's Girl Hariji, I want to say the name of it is. You can find it on Netflix quite easily. And that was a BBC co-production with one of the Japanese networks, I think. And that was about a Japanese cop who ends up going to the UK to solve a mystery. And he's very much the hero, and it just flips that narrative around, and it's fine. Like, it's good that it flips that narrative around and you see that. But at the same time, I just don't have a problem with an American film telling a story with an American hero in a Japanese landscape.
This is an argument that comes up an awful lot whenever the Tom Cruise film, The Last Samurai, is raised. In that film, he plays an American Civil War officer who is sort of cast out of the US in disgrace, finds himself training in westernized military fashion, the imperial forces against the samurai rebellion, but then flip sides and finds himself within the samurai learning their ways. So I always found that a fascinating argument with sort of reference to that film. And I don't disagree with the point you made. I think in these enlightened times, there's probably a way to do that which still respects the customs and the traditions of traditional, Japanese storytelling and Japanese customs. But there's also a way, like they did with Bill Murray in Lost in Translation, of putting this big goofball American egocentric actor into the Japanese culture and watching how he deals with it on a very sort of in a very sort of honest way. And
I've seen complaints of Lost in Translation that suggests that Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson are pretty much engaging in what I was complaining about with some of these British documentaries primarily, where Joanna Lumley will go to Japan, as she did in Joanna Lumley's Japan. And it's very much sort of pointing at this sort of life, this culture, say, isn't this weird the way that they do that? But I don't feel that Lost in Translation really did that as much as it was talking about the fact that you've got two characters who are, as the film title suggests, they're just feeling a bit lost and distant in a culture which is really a little bit strange and different from their own, but they were just not quite able to connect with, the world around them.
Yeah. Before you walk away from the television side of this thing, we have to mention what a huge influence Shogun was back in the day, the adaptation of the James Clavell novel. Richard Chamberlain was, Richard Chamberlain was a huge television star at that time, coming off The Thornbirds. And this is a big, sweeping historical epic starring one of the great Japanese actors, Toshiro Mifune, all set within the world of the samurai and the Shogun warriors. So it is still a remarkable work. It was a multi-million-dollar production back in the day, and one of those right at the height of that mini-series boom period in the 80s.
Yeah. Look, you've got a fairly extensive list here of some titles. The one that came to mind immediately when you suggested this was Black Rain, being Ridley Scott's terrible film with Michael Douglas in it.
Not a fan? See, I am a fan of Black Rain. I am very conscious of it being of the utilizing the Japanese backdrop of just being organized crime, of just being about the Yakuza. And there's another film in there, a Paul Schrader, Sidney Pollack film called The Yakuza with Robert Mitchum, obviously, you know, set deep within the world of crime over there. But I thought Black Rain was a very stylish.
Oh, no, that's it. I think visually it's very cool looking.
Yep.
But I just don't think the film's much chop beyond that.
It had a good decapitation in it. Spoiler alert, but Andy Garcia. Nasty.
Yeah, but like the lead up to don't even get me started.
Okay, all right, that's fine. But that's a classic example of just picking up two big American stars, plonking them in the middle of Japan, and see how they're reacting to what's going on around them without actually taking too much on board as to the culture that they're interacting with. It's how that culture impacts these two big white stars. So there's an argument to be made there for the downside of Black Rain.
Yeah, I don't really have an issue with it, but you know, whatever. People write at me. A film that wasn't on your list was maybe the most essential film of American cinema, which is really exploring Japanese ideals, which is a film called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, which I'm sure we all remember takes our titular Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and takes them to, I don't know, some point in Japanese history. I never saw it.
You never saw it, but it's on your list. I love that.
1603. It's in feudal Japan.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, well, that's appropriation, but whatever. There may be even though it was only
suggesting that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles engaged in some level of appropriation.
A tad, just a tad.
What?
I think it's going to be a little bit harder to defend the 1992 film Mr. Baseball, starring Tom Selleck as the washed-up major leaguer who tries to revive his career with a minor league Japanese club. This makes Cool Runnings looks like a study in cultural appreciation. Mr. Baseball has not aged very well over the years. One of the great films which absolutely respects Japanese culture and its history is Silence, the Martin Scorsese film starring Liam Neeson and Andrew Garfield from 2016. What else have we got on this list here? Going back a few years, there was a series of Hollywood films which sort of looked at the interaction between Americans and American heroism in the wake of World War II. House of Bamboo is a kind of just a sort of a crime thriller action movie in which a train being guarded by both Japanese and US troops is robbed, weaponry is stolen, and it takes an American going undercover, played by Robert Stack, to bring that booty out into the open. And it's a film that probably defies some of the stereotypes of the time, as does Tea House of the August Moon, a 1956 film with Glenn Ford as this sort of goofy US officer who's sent to a small village with a translator called Sakini, played by Marlon Brando. Boy, I'm a bit cautious of this, to colonize and modernize the village by teaching them the American way, but the villagers obviously have some other agenda in their minds. So yeah, look, it's fascinating, the relationship between how Hollywood perceives their heroes and how they want to use Japan in their movies. And yeah, look, it's a beautiful part of the world. Because when were you there? You traveled there, didn't you?
Yeah, I spent a month there back in 2019.
Yeah,
thereabouts.
Yeah,
2019, I think.
We've done a couple of days. We did Shinjuku for one night and had a stopover in Narita Airport. So we had a day in the city there. I've never done a lot of time in Japan, but I absolutely love the country and want to get back there.
Yeah, strongly encourage it.
Absolutely. And we should point out later this year that our own Brad Pitt is coming up in a movie called Bullet Train, which is about 5 assassins aboard a fast-moving bullet train, and how they all interact at the height of bullet train speed. So looking forward to that.
Sorry, I thought you were about to announce that later in the year, Screen Watching is going to do a special series from Japan, Screen Watching Japan.
Yeah.
And so we go to Japan to watch movies and TV shows over there.
We go on
Actually,
like.
sorry, here's something which is very relevant to this podcast.
Okay.
So when I was in Japan, I wanted to engage in the pop culture of Japan.
Sure.
But it just dawned on me that like I kind of know anime, but I'm not really that into anime. Like it's fine. And I don't really understand like enough of the cultural references going on for me to go into stores and suddenly revel in anything because I just didn't know enough. And you can only really sort of get by with having seen like 4 or 5 films and know a bit of Ultraman to really get by. So like I couldn't really engage in that much, but I did go to the movies a couple of times to watch American films in Japanese cinemas. But I thought it was particularly interesting. So I think Shazam was the big movie of the time. I was about a month before the Godzilla film that came out that year was playing, which is a bit annoying, but I did get a poster from Japan with the Godzilla thing. But anyway, saw Shazam and like that was a perfectly fine experience. I liked that in a lobby of Japanese cinemas, and it could just be the chain that I was in. I can't remember where it was, but they had a store where you could go and get movie posters and other memorabilia and stuff. And
wow.
I don't know why cinemas don't do that because it's a good idea. But
It really is.
the thing that I thought was particularly unique was when I was in, was I in Kyoto? I'm going to say it was Kyoto. It just happens to coincide with the first release ever of Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, wow.
It had never screened in Japan.
That's like
in
20 years later. That's 15
Yeah.
odd years later. It's amazing.
So if you remember, there was that film that came out, which I want to say was called One Cut of the Dead, which is about a Japanese filmmaker making a zombie movie. And that film was a huge success in Japan and was like maybe the #1 film of the year. Because of the success of that, the distributors thought, well, let's try launching Shaun of the Dead into Japanese cinemas, see how it goes. So I saw this tweet from Edgar Wright saying that, oh, my film's being released for the first time. I'm like, fantastic. I'm in town. I'm going to go and check it out. So I went to the cinema and my wife and I sat in like the second or third row. It was not a huge cinema, but there was maybe like another 10, 15 people in there at most. We're watching the movie and it's a great film on the big screen. Like we were laughing with it and just having a great time watching the film. But we seem to be the only people laughing.
Uh-oh.
And then we left the cinema and I was doing some reading up afterwards. And please, if anyone knows better than I do, like, please let me know. But I believe from what I read afterwards, that it's actually considered hugely impolite to make any noises while you're there watching a movie. So myself and Sarah were clearly the boorish Westerners who were, creating a great sort of social faux pas. But the thing is, it's a hilarious movie and that's what the movie's there for.
Well, yes, I would think with comedies, there would be laugh out loud moments, even in Japanese films, especially in Japanese films. Some of the funniest films I've seen have been Japanese films. So what do? Just sort of titter under their breath.
Like, I guess we were certainly the only people laughing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like you are boorish, though. They make a good point.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly it. So, we've got that. Just very quickly, 2 other titles I was going to throw out quickly of things that came to mind without putting a lot of thought into this. Kill Bill Volume 1, which is obviously a lot going on there Japan-wise. But the other thing is The Wolverine, which I believe is the second Wolverine movie that had Hugh Jackman in it.
I don't think I've seen it.
That one's actually not too bad. So the first one's terrible.
Right.
But the second one has him going to Japan, and it's basically really his version of TMNT 3. Okay, but it's basically just because within the comics of Wolverine, there's a well-regarded storyline where it's about him as like a samurai, like in Japan. I've never read the books, I don't know. But apparently that's a thing. So they incorporated that into a film, and you've got him getting caught up in local Yakuza action in Japan.
Wow, okay. I've got to watch it. I don't
pretty fun film. But as a Sydney-sider, you might want to watch, there's a couple of sequences in it which are actually filmed in Picton.
Picton on the Central Coast?
It's not really on the Central Coast. It's more go past like Campbelltown, MacArthur Way, and
okay.
Yeah. So like I found myself down the street going, "This is a bit familiar," and then I did like some googling, and I realized I was walking where Wolverine had tread in Japan.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Picton was a stand-in for Japan. I thought you meant that
with a lot of CG happening around.
Wolverine goes to Picton. Okay, well I didn't know that. Okay, well I should check out Wolverine. We should point out.
I think it's an entertaining film, except for the final act where it just gets a bit sort of stupid superhero-y, where it becomes less a crime movie starring Wolverine, and then becomes like a big thing where he has to fight like a big robot or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a lot of these up on our Facebook channel, but some big stars have been in Japanese commercials. I'm going to run through these off and on very quickly. Most famous, and these did the rounds a few years ago on social media, the series of Tommy Lee Jones commercials for Boss Coffee. He is apparently a huge star in commercials over there, and for nearly a dozen years, he made commercials for Boss Coffee. So if you do check out our Facebook page, I'm going to put some of these up over there. Harrison Ford did one for Kieran Beer. These are all things we never see in the West. Arnold Schwarzenegger has made a fortune out of the Japanese advertising sector. He's done stuff for Koa Coffee, Alina Man Energy Drink. There's so many that Schwarzenegger has dabbled in. Richard Gere sold Japan Airlines non-stop flights to Washington, D.C. Eric Clapton sold Honda automobiles. Bruce Willis is another one that's done a whole lot of commercials in the Japanese market for Koa Coffee and Daihatsu. Hugh Jackman, there you go, Wolverine himself, sold Lipton iced tea to the Japanese. Brad Pitt sold SoftBank, a mobile phone provider over there. Justin Bieber, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Natalie Portman sold soap. So the big stars, they get some big bucks out of the Eastern market, Eastern advertising market.
Okay, Simon, this is the point in the podcast where we look at the week ahead. So these are the movies that are debuting like roughly now through to next time when we start reviewing things. Simon, there's a documentary on Disney Plus.
Yeah, it's called We Feed People. It's directed by Ron Howard. It zeroes in on Jose Andre. He's the head of the nonprofit World Central Kitchens. And this documentary tracks them from a very scrappy group of grassroots volunteers, as the publicity calls it, all the way to becoming one of the most highly regarded humanitarian organizations in the disaster relief sector. He's found this sort of second wind doing documentaries at the moment, Ron Howard. In addition to We Feed People, he's got he had the one up about the community in California who were devastated by the fires there. So, and with We Feed People, it's bound to be another heartfelt Ron Howard production. That's from May 27 on Disney Plus.
Now, the film that you probably should have mentioned on there, but you have not, is the live action / animated Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers film.
Well, that's out is that out as we record this? I meant to watch it yesterday.
Yeah, like we should have discussed it on the podcast. So
we
we'll
really
certainly
should have.
next week's podcast.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do that because it's a major work.
Yeah, you joke, but like essentially, this has been a very well-reviewed movie.
I'm very excited. I've heard great things about it. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to talk about that. TV-wise, it's actually a really quiet week coming up. And Simon, something I've got to talk to you about, this should have been a production meeting beforehand, is usually we record this podcast on Friday evenings because we're cool guys with a lot going on.
Yeah.
But today we've had to record it on Saturday afternoon, so I'm going to try to publish this as quickly as possible after we finish talking.
Sure.
But next week, I think we need to record at the same time because I think it would be remiss of us not to talk about the series Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is watching, as well as the series return of Stranger Things.
I know. I did notice those dates in preparing for this week's show. I thought, what do we do? So yeah, it might be another Saturday record next week because they are two big deals. Is all of Obi-Wan dropping? Is all of Stranger Things dropping in one hit?
No.
Okay, so we'll get through a couple of episodes and can have a chat about them. I think we have to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't think we'll be able to get screener access for either. So it will be something where we have to wait for them to go public and then we'll be able to watch them.
Oh, that is a big week. That is a big deal.
Yeah. No, it is. So yeah, next week's podcast will be a little bit late as Simon and I have agreed, obviously, in pre-podcast production meetings.
I do just want to mention very quickly the Art Gallery of New South Wales. This is our special event screenings. They've got a free online program of called The Art of Australia, 3 episodes, Strangers in a Strange Land, Coming of Age and Beyond Australia. These are all curated by the late director of the Art Gallery, Edmund Capon. It explores how art and artists help shape Australia. They're available to view until the 31st of May, totally free. Just a login and password will be emailed to you once you tell them your name and your email address. So it's free. Go and check out that for a little bit of culture.
Little bit of culture. Hey, Simon, let's take a look at this week in history. On this, no, not on this day. It's, technically tomorrow as we record this. May 22nd, 1992, Johnny Carson hosted the final appearance as host of The Tonight Show. And remiss in your look, if you're going to look at the week in history, you should also say that on the 25th of May, 1992, was the debut of Jay Leno as the host of The Tonight Show.
Yeah, that was a big deal. May 23, 1969, BBC orders 13 episodes of a little show called Monty Python's Flying Circus, and comedy was never the same again. May 25, 1969, Midnight Cowboy, starring John Voight and Dustin Hoffman, is released. It won the Best Picture in 1970. Dan, can you tell us what is significant about the win?
So I saw this question in your notes here, and I haven't looked it up, but I believe the answer will be that it's the only R-rated movie to have ever won the Academy Award.
Nice try, my friend. The only X-rated movie to have ever won.
X-rated, sorry.
Yes.
Of course, there'd be other R-rated films that have got it. Yeah.
The first, and I think to this stage, the only X-rated film to win the Best Picture Oscar. Nice little work you did there with the music too. Good for you.
Yeah, I forgot to actually connect my Bluetooth to the mixing board here, so I had to just play it by the microphone. So hopefully it picked up. Yeah. Are you saying that Debbie Does Dallas did not win any sort of Academy Award?
It was heavily campaigned for. There was a groundswell of support for Debbie Does Dallas to be nominated, but it didn't happen.
Very disappointing.
I said swell. May 25, 1977.
Simon, please.
Star Wars, a little film called Star Wars: A New Hope, directed by one G. Lucas, was first released and went on to some success and fleeting acclaim. Beaten for Best Picture by which film? That's right, Woody Allen's Annie Hall.
Correct.
And
hey, May 7, 2006, Paul Gleason. He passed away at age 67.
Now, you'll remember him. I always mention this because I love this guy. He passed away too young, right when his career was sort of firing up. He was the principal in The Breakfast Club and provided all the big laughs as the bumbling police officer in Die Hard. Paul Gleason, you are missed.
Was he a police officer or was he one of the FBI agents?
No, there was Agent Johnson and Agent Johnson, who were the two FBI agents played by Robert Darby and that other guy. They came in, and no, Paul Gleason was an LAPD boss or something, or a negotiator.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was very funny in that. So we miss you, Paul Gleason. Come back. Well, don't come back now. But
I don't remember him being too funny, And also, why are you asking to come back?
Yeah, I know, that'd be icky right now.
No, not happy birthday. No, not that. Please, no, not happy birthday.
Okay, I'm going to do a bit of an edit and cull this first one you got there because that's ridiculous.
No, she's a big deal. It'll help if I hashtag that. We're going to get lots of social hits. Her name's Emma Chamberlain. That's named Emma Chamberlain. Let me just put it out there. I put it in there because recently she did the Met Gala red carpet, and she was a big hit.
Make it better.
It's I'm going for an interview with her. She'll turn up on a YouTube channel eventually. So, who knows? Anyway, happy birthday, Emma Chamberlain.
How many YouTube movies and stuff we talk about on the podcast with any regularity?
Well, maybe if we talked about them more, people like Emma Chamberlain would hashtag us.
I feel like the audience for Emma Chamberlain do not care what you and I have to say about anything.
Yeah, that's probably a good point. I feel most of the audience don't really care what we have to say, but they tune in for our general demeanors.
That's probably fair. Hey, May 23rd, 1977, Richard Ayoade was born. People would know him from
the IT Crowd,
I guess.
There's a new thing on it SBS? It might be SBS called Question Team, where he gets the comedians to write their own questions, and it's quite funny occasionally.
Yeah.
Ayoade. May 24th, 1998.
I quite like Richard Ayoade.
Yes, so do I, A young actress named Daisy Edgar Jones was born May 24th, 1998. Now, she's on the verge of really big things. She was the star of the TV series Normal People. She was in the Disney Plus horror comedy called Fresh, and she's coming up in the big screen adaptation of the best-selling young adult novel Where the Crawdads Sing. So she's on the verge of major stardom.
Was she not also the Rogue One star?
No.
No, who was that one? Who's that British actress?
One of the Emilys. I can't remember now. Isn't it terrible? I can't remember her name. I get all those Emma Watsons and Emily Watsons and Emily Blunts. I get them so mixed up. Are you looking up who the star of Rogue One was?
Yeah, I am.
I know that.
Yeah, we'll get there one day.
We'll get there. May 25, 1976. Cillian, how do you say that? Murphy, the Irish actor. Cillian, from 28 Days Later, Peaky Blinders, and one of the Batman films. He was born May 25, 1976. And while Dan continues to look up the Rogue One cast list, May 26, 1962, Bobcat Goldthwait, the comedian from Police Academy. One of your That was good. You do a good Bobcat Goldthwait. He was born May 26, 1962, and the star of Rogue One was
Ben Mendelsohn.
Yeah, well, that's true. It was.
The actor we are referring to here is Felicity Jones.
Oh, Felicity Jones. I knew it. She's very good in that. Still my favorite Star Wars film. There you go.
Really?
Rogue, apart from A New Hope, absolutely. We've had this discussion before.
No, it's not good, right?
It's one of the great. It's one of the great Star Wars films. We're not going to end the podcast with us yelling at each other about Star Wars again, are we? We've done that like a dozen times.
Folks, I'm getting out of here. I can't stand this anymore. You've been listening to Screen Watching. My name's Dan Barrett. On Twitter, I'm at the Dan Barrett. You can start your day with my free newsletter. It's called Always Be Watching. Find out at alwaysbewatching.com. It's got the big stories in TV streaming and strong opinionated ideas about Star Wars in film. And on Friday, you got the Always Be Streaming newsletter, which recounts the big shows that launched that week. Simon, production meeting. Yes. We should also talk about Star Wars Celebration, which will be happening during the week this week, I believe.
We should definitely do that. And we really have to decide if we want to do a big Tom Cruise show next week in line with the launch of Top Gun Maverick, which is hitting cinemas on the 26th. So these on-air production meetings are really great listening for the audience, aren't they? They really
are, but they've been highly productive for me.
I'm on the Twitter at Simon R. Foster 1. I'm over at my website, Screenspace, screen-space.net. Go to the Screen Watching Facebook page for lots of cool stuff. Do check out our Screen Watching YouTube channel. A lot of stuff went up there through the week. Interview with Natalie Cox, British actress, star of Miss Willoughby and the Haunted Bookshop. It's out now on DVD and streaming. We've got an interview with filmmakers Tariki Onus and Alec Morgan, their film Ablaze, about the groundbreaking Aboriginal activist Bill Onus, is in cinemas May 26. And I've got an interview with Taneli Mustonen, who's the director of The Twin, which is a terrific horror film starring our own Teresa Palmer. It's on Shudder as we speak, plus new trailers for the Apple TV movies Cha-Cha Real Smooth with Dakota Johnson and Luck, the new animated film. So yeah, YouTube channel's very busy. Do get on over there.
Yeah, folks, this has been Screen Watching. We'll be back next week with more podcast. I believe on next week's show, we'll be talking about the return of Stranger Things and Obi-Wan Kenobi debuting on Disney+. We'll also be, actually, this is an exciting thing I can reveal on the podcast for the first time.
Let's hear about
Simon and I are both going to talk about our 3 favorite Tom Cruise films.
That's a great idea. That could be a good middle bit.
Shh. We've already planned that. People don't need to know. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. I am looking forward to that.
Anyway, folks, this has been Screen Watching. We'll be back next week with more.
Bye-bye, Dan.
Bye-bye, Simon.